Round 8 is the week of players who aren't necessarily minimum price cash cows, but a serious value in NRL fantasy. So guys who are 100, 200K below the price they should be, but sort of sitting in that middle area. A lot of guys around 600K, some around 400K. There's plenty of options this week. Let's jump into one of them right here. So Dave Fifita is the first one here. Now, Dave Fifita, you get him for 792K. He's been averaging 60 so far this year, has not scored a try. Think about Dave Fifita. 60 average without a try. You throw in some try scoring regression there. He could pump out a 70, 80 average over a certain period of time and be a 70 average at the end of the year. So Dave Fifita is a guy where I think a lot of people are going to miss on him. And I think he's going to explode this week against the Dolphins. And a lot of people will be saying, oh, why didn't I think of Dave Fifita? Well, here's your warning. Get on Dave Fifita. Next guy here is Brandon Smith, 478K. And he's just been a guy who's been a bit frustrating so far. But the last 3 games, he's played between 63 and 68 minutes a game. That's surefire. Starting hooker, a guy who runs the ball, not a great defensive work rate for fantasy, but 478K, I'm riding that. I'm probably getting on Brandon Smith. The other thing, he's a middle as well. And a lot of people did bring in Couchman last week. He's not a guy you can rely on right now. So Brandon Smith's a guy you can plug right into that middle spot. And for anyone asking too, Biz is out of action this week. He's tied up with work, but I've got his input on all these and promptly ignored it. These are all my picks. Biz is all his hands are all over these as well. Next guy here, and this is one that Biz is pretty keen on, but Jack de Belin, 614K. Jack de Belin averages 60 points a game in games where he plays 60 or more minutes. I believe that was Lockie Angus that mentioned that stat. It's a good stat, and it's a stat about a guy who probably is about 100K, 200K undervalued if he's going to play that 70-plus minute role. So if Jack de Belin plays big minutes, he's going to score big points. The only risk there is whether his minutes go back to what they were the first 2 games, but it's starting to look like those first 2 games were him being acclimatized back into first grade, getting the sort of fitness under his legs after a bit of a slow start to the year. And this is the role that St. George see for him going forward. So JDB is another guy that I'm really looking at, and Brandon Smith, they're probably the 2 I'm buying. I already own Dave Fifita. Ryan Matterson after that. So 792K for Ryan Matterson. Same price as Dave Fifita. They're different kinds of players. So Matto's scoring his points without doing anything too crazy in terms of he's getting a lot of tackles. He's making a lot of run meters. He's making offloads. There is a little bit of risk there in the middle forward rotation just because Jermaine Hopgood has earned so many minutes there, and now they've got Junior Polo and Regan Campbell-Gillard. But Ryan Matterson's just a guy, I've got to mention him here because he plays all 3 major bye rounds. And everyone's asking, what middle should I go for? Well, Ryan Matterson's a guy that you're going to be plugging in around 13, 16, and 19. And you can just rely on him because he's never going to score below 50. Like, it may happen, but the way he scores points, he's always going to be between sort of 50 and 70 points. There might be that explosion game somewhere, but he's just so reliable. Last guy here is Payne Haas, and you got to mention him. Again, people ask about middles. Payne Haas is the best of the best. And what encouraged me about Payne Haas last week was we saw him play, I think it was the first 68 minutes straight? He was on in the 60th minute sort of thing. He played 68 minutes total. He basically didn't go off until the game was won. That's different because Payne Haas's minutes were sort of on a decline, and that had me a little sus on him. You know, he's producing still. He's attacking a bit wider. He's making more tackle breaks. He's making more offloads, involving more attacking plays. But those big minutes in that game when it mattered encouraged me a lot. And I think against Parramatta, he's going to do the same thing this week. So Payne Haas is a guy, you're just not going to go wrong with him. And unless he picks up an injury, which is sort of what's derailed him the last couple of seasons, he's a guy that you can just run all year long. If he picks up that injury, maybe have a look at it. But for now, he's looking solid. Next group here is the cash cows. So how are we going to make money for these guns that we're talking about? Here are 5 guys that have been coming up a lot. There's a lot of garbage in this list, though. I mean, you can't make a cash cow. We can't just fabricate them. We can't pretend that any guy who's cheap and starting is a cash cow. I'm going to go real or fake or risky on these 5 guys here. So first one, Jacob Host. I'm adding an extra category, plotter. Like Jacob Host, he's got a locked-in role. Kaloa Matangi's out 6 to 8 weeks. Michael Cheekham is behind him in the list. Host hasn't been playing 80 minutes, which concerns me a bit. But 377K, there's not a lot of room for him to grow. If things go well, he'll get to 500K. So you're looking at 123K for the trade in, trade out. Souths play the first major buy round in round 13, so you get that too. But Host is very capable of a 25-point game. So I'm steering clear on Host personally. I don't think the upside is there, but the Jags are attacking stats, then maybe it'll work. Hayes Dunster's next, and look, plays all major buy rounds. We talked about that with Parramatta. 220K, absolute minimum price. Bailey Simonson's back from suspension this week. He doesn't take Dunster's spot. Hayes is not a fantasy producer. He's averaging 9 points for a reason. He had -2 and then 20. He'll probably score some tries on that wing for Parramatta at some point, but you're probably going to be selling Hayes Dunster for 300, 320K at some point this year if you do buy him. So he's not going to be a money producer for you, but he might be a guy where you need a cash out to go get Nico Hines or whatever it is there. And he's a guy who's going to play in those buy rounds. That's the only thing I can think of there, but he's kind of average too. Declan Casey's the next one, and he is a massive fade as well. Just steer clear on that one. Casey, there's a lot of guys there. I mean, look, Skelton is talked about highly. He's probably going to be ahead of Casey at some point this year. You've got Carraz, only 3 weeks. You've got Adokar, who's another 6 weeks sort of thing as well. There's just not enough there in that Dogs backline, and it's not a backline that's really producing for fantasy either. Just in that the Dogs aren't winning that many games, and their forward pack is just weakening and weakening. So steer clear there. Next one here is Phoenix Crossland. He's probably the best of the bunch here. Phoenix played 67 minutes last week. You got to look too at the fact that Kurt Mann is now named as the starting lock. Great news for Phoenix. I don't think Tyson Gamble is going to steal meaningful minutes from him as a hooker. If he does, that's going to be pretty unlucky for you if you bought Phoenix. But I think what happens here is Kurt Mann probably starts at lock, maybe moves to hooker at some point when guys like Jacob Safidi and Matt Croker come onto the field. Even then, it's probably only a 20-minute stint. I think Phoenix, if he was playing 67 minutes last week, he's probably going to keep playing a 60-plus minute role. So he also grabbed a try last week too. Like 400K, he should probably average about 40. Don't expect that 50 you got last week. He should probably average about 40. There's no imminent return of a hooker coming in here either. Like they're looking for a long-term solution at Newcastle because Jaden Brelly's out for the year. So at 400K, there's upside there. There's probably not that much risk. He's got a pretty good rolling average right now, so he's going to make you some cash. I don't mind it if the trades work out, but don't destroy your team to get Phoenix Crossland. Last guy here is Dream Bula, and 230K. Look, it's a nice price for a starting fullback, especially. It's a really nice price. You can afford to wait a week on this guy. Wait a week. So last game the Tigers played, who was their starting fullback? It was Charlie Staines. The game before that, who was it? It was Adam Dewey. Who started the year at fullback? Oh, it was Dane Laurie. Like, they've had 4 fullbacks now, maybe even 5. Like, they just had that many guys lining up. And, Bula might be the guy. For the cost of 20,000 or 20K there, you can wait on him. You can wait and see. Just watch him play. Look, if he's a generational talent, then absolutely. But if he's not, then there's Talau on the bench. There's guys like Nofalima in reserve grade. Anyone could come in. Staines could go back to fullback. Staines played well at fullback against Parramatta. I'm going to reiterate that. Last game they played, Staines played well at fullback. Probably his best game in Tigers colours. Maybe his best game ever. There's too much risk there. So fade all of them. Crossland's the one guy that I'm kind of thinking about here, but I'd really rather just go to Brandon Smith if I could over Crossland, just because job security is way better. Next group here is the traps. So guys to steer clear of. And the last group were kind of traps too, but these are the serious traps. I'm going to go quick on these guys. Granville first. Look, Tamalolo is out for 4 to 6 weeks. That's good news for Granville. Downside is Ruben Cotter comes into the starting side. We also see Jordan McLean come back into the team. Granville's on the bench. Granville's had games where he's played 50 minutes and scored 10 points this year. Last week he played 67 minutes as a middle forward. All right. We can wear our fantasy hats and we can say, oh, that's fantastic. He's going to score 38 points every week playing 67 minutes as middle forward. Maybe. But if I was a Cowboys coach, would I be thinking, I'm going to play Jake Granville as a middle forward for me for 67 minutes a game? And we've got to think about that. Not just does it make sense for fantasy, but does it make sense for the Cowboys? And it doesn't. There's got to be some young guys. There's got to be some other prop options. Maybe even, the guys who are on the edge might move into the middle. We've got guys like Lukey who will come back at some point. There's just no reason for Granville to play that many minutes as a middle forward. I think if you buy him, you're going to end up sitting on a guy who's scoring between 10 and 30 points a game a lot of the time. He's going to fluke those bigger games, but even this game, he had season highs for tackles, 37 tackles, season high for run meters, 70 run meters. He posted a 38. Like 267K is nice, but yeah, it's just I'm not doing it. But a lot of really smart coaches like him. So if you like it, trust your gut, do what you want to do. I'm not a fan. Next one's Cody Walker. Scored a bunch of tries. Look, just a fake. Like, he's a great football player in real life, and he's probably just behind Hines for me as the number 6 choice for the Blues. I don't think Luai is gonna be picked there. But for Cody Walker, you just rely on tries too much for your half in fantasy, and he'll have those games where he doesn't score any tries. Maybe against Penrith this week, for example. Same with Campbell Graham as well. I'd steer clear, relying too heavily on tries. Brendan Hands, look, Josh Hodgson was out last week. He was sick, and Brendan Hands played 80 minutes, scored 31 points in a win. It's not great. I still think if he got the starting job, we're all buying Brendan Hands, obviously. But he's on the bench again for Hodgson. You're paying $294K. If at some point before the buys he's minimum price and there's a cash out to do, maybe it's something we can talk about, but just stick clear. Robert Jennings, 305K. Look, Tessie knew he'll be back soon. It's really simple. And Robert Jennings isn't the best fantasy scorer. Titans not a bad fixture this week, but 305K, it's too much. And he's just not going to keep his spot. Ray Stone, 314K. There's risk in this one. So Felice Kafusi comes back this week. Kenny Bromwich is suspended for 1 or 2 weeks. But he was playing on the edge, and he likely moves back into the middle once he comes back into the team. That eats minutes from Ray Stone. Jesse Bromwich comes in. That eats minutes for Ray Stone. You've got Mark Nichols on the bench. That eats minutes. Jared Wallace is back. That eats minutes. Like, Ray Stone needs so many minutes because he's about a 0.5 per minute scorer. So if he gets 40 minutes, he scores 20 points typically, right? So he needs to average 30. He needs about 60 minutes a game. You can maybe push it upwards a bit from that, but he's just not going to get 60 minutes a game in this team. And in the best formation of the team, he's probably not even getting 30 minutes, probably getting like 20, 25 minutes. It's just not going to work for fantasy. And the buys aren't good enough. They're not going to lose guys to Origin, particularly through that period as well. Like, you're just going to end up stuck with this guy that you bought for 314K. He might get you to 370K at some point, maybe, but you could also start regressing very quickly, and it's just not worth it. Up next is the hold. So these are the guys we want to hang on to this week. And these are guys I'm pretty sold on, actually. So Alamoti and Burton are both from the Dogs. And my rationale here is I was looking at Burton as a sell, potentially. Almost more out of frustration. His base stats haven't been the best. Even in that Parramatta game, he was really struggling, and he made a few good runs. And he got to about a 40-point game. But his score's been okay, but he's looked kind of dodgy. He's looked like he's going to produce a 20-point game for us at some point. Saying that, the Dogs have fantastic fixtures coming up. So Alamoti and Burton are both going to benefit from that. Look, the Sharks this week is a tougher game. Sharks can still leak some points, so I'm not super concerned. But going on after that, they've got some really easy fixtures coming up. So just go check out the Dogs fixtures. Like, I'm holding Alamoti and Burton. I'm starting those guys, and I'm going to see what happens. Alamoti in particular, I think, at some point this year, if he stays as a center and stops getting moved to the wing, he'll be around 600K at some point this year. He doesn't play the first major buy round. That's the challenge there. But he's a guy who's got all the makings of a gun fantasy center. Hasn't scored a try yet either. Still posting those 30 to 50 scores when he did score a try on the wing this week. But I mean, at center, he hasn't scored a try, and he's still been posting those big scores. Next guy, Reece Robson. Now, I don't have Robson. 763K. He had a bit of a shocker last week. He was on -2 after 25 minutes, which was crazy. And look, he was a guy I was considering buying last week, and I ended up going with Nico Hines instead. But nearly thought about Robson because he's got great buy fixtures, and he's typically a very reliable tackler. Had a few penalties last week. He ended up with a reasonable score in the 30s, but if you got him, you got to hold him. He's going to be good for the buys. You stick with him. If you don't have him, keep an eye on him, because if he ends up closer to 700,000 or even 720, 730K, something like that, he's a pretty hot buy. I'm going to keep an eye on him, a very close eye on him, especially if this Cowboys forward pack starts to perform better with Ruben Cotter back too. That's the big indicator. This guy here is Tanner Boyd. 530K is nice. Tanner, like you're in a spot where he's producing between 40 and 50 points a game for the last month of footy, and he's probably going to make you some cash. And a lot of people jumped off that train early on, but I know people who stuck with Tanner, and just stick with him at this point. He's got a nice fixture this week. He's got the Dolphins. He did all the kicking with Kieran Foran. He lost all the kicking to Toby Sexton. Like, if he plays that 7 role and not the 6 role, that's the big differentiator for Tanner Boyd. Then he's going to produce for you in fantasy. So stick with him. Like, start him. He'll probably score you 45 points this week. Last guy is Tommy Turbo, and 589k. Tommy Turbo has been a disaster. He scored terribly in a big loss a couple of weeks ago, and then he scored pretty crappily as well last week. So what did he score? Like 32 or 36 points with a try. You know, it hasn't been great, but he's got the Tigers this week. And if I know anything about Tommy Turbo, he doesn't stay down for long. I think he could have one of those big explosion games. I can't remember who he's playing, but he's got a pretty easy matchup next week as well. So you keep Tommy Turbo through to Origin. You hope that he sort of spikes up for you, get some value, and then you either hold on or make a trade at some point. But I think the mid 500s is probably the lowest that he's going to get in terms of price before he starts to really pop off. He might even explode this week and sort of take the lid off it. Next group here is the sell. So guys, to move on, look pretty straightforward. Bryce Cartwright was moved to the bench last week. I sold him a couple of weeks ago thinking that might happen the first week that Perham were full strength, but it didn't happen then. It happened last week instead. Brad Arthur loves that last minute move. Do not read into the team list. Cardi's name to start right now. It doesn't mean anything at all. So I reckon he probably goes back to the bench again. Look, 559k, you've made your money out of him. Move on. You know, get some money for something else. Jermaine Hopgood, if you have both these guys, it hurts because they have great buys, but 75k, you're either making the call right now to hold Hopgood through all of Origin, if you think that's worthwhile, and if you back the talent, or you move him on and you get someone else. I personally think that off the bench, or even starting, just with the fact that Matterson moves into the middle when Cardi comes on, the fact that Lane is a rock-solid 80-minute player, Junior Paulo, Regan Campbell-Gillard, they're both playing big minutes. There just isn't enough in this for Hopgood in terms of minutes. Like, he's going to float between sort of 50 and 70 minutes a game, and he's just not the main guy in his team anymore with all the players back that Parramatta have now. So he's going to have his big games, but I would be moving him on at 705k. Pat Carrigan, 685k, and that's a hard one because Paddy Carrigan, he doesn't really score tries. So he doesn't really produce those attacking stats for you. And he's not playing the big minutes in the games where the Broncos are getting ahead. And that's a problem because they're getting ahead in a lot of big games. So, you know, you don't really have that massive upside for him, but you definitely have that downside risk. So he can post a 35 for you, but he'll never be posting you an 80-point game like some of these other guys we're talking about. Well, like Hopgood's a great comparison to Carrigan. They're probably pretty similar guys, but Hopgood has explosive upside, whereas Carrigan doesn't have that as much. Fantastic player in real life, but just not fantasy. I'd move him on personally. He's going to play Origin as well. Just no need. Hayes Perham's the next one here. And look, you could hold on to Hayes Perham if you wanted to. I just think he's a bit capped as far as him as a player. I think dogs are a bit limited right now as well. I think there's not going to be a lot for him to be backing up through the middle. Hayes, and 447k, he's sort of done his job for you. I'd move him on. I just don't think he's individually as explosive as guys like Alamoti and Burton, who we talked about in the holds. And the last one's Eli Katoa, and this one's a bit tricky. It's not a certainty. But Eli Katoa, 629k. Look, this is round 8 right now, and round 9, Storm have a bye. Round 13, Storm also have a bye. So you need to make a call this week or next week. And you need to say to yourself, either Eli Katoa is a keeper of my team for the rest of the year, or I'm moving him on. I'm going to make value out of the money. One move that I think isn't the worst, especially if you're strong on the edges, but you are lacking in middle forwards, is the Eli Katoa to Jack de Belin sort of move. That gets you an extra player for round 13, gets you an extra player for next week as well. And Jack de Belin, if you back him to play the 80-minute role, you're getting an upgrade in points there too. But if you think Eli Katoa is a keeper, hold on to him as well. Like, I'm not telling you you have to get rid of him, but you have to make that call. That's what I'm getting at here. Pods. This is the juiciest part, and we're going to go into pods next. Video suggestion right here.